The afternoon sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon when Amara Johnson turned onto Maple Street, the quiet suburban road that led to her home. She'd had a long day at the office, running tests on the new electric motor design, and all she wanted was to get home, kick off her heels, and relax with a cup of tea. Her hands rested lightly on the steering wheel of her midnight blue luxury sedan. The car hummed quietly beneath her, its electric engine barely making a sound. She'd designed most of the powertrain herself, and even after 3 years, she still got a little thrill every time she drove it. This wasn't just any car. This was her baby, her masterpiece. The street was nearly empty at this hour. Most people were home having dinner with their families. Amara glanced at the clock on the dashboard. 6:45. She made a mental note to call her mother later. That's when she saw the flashing lights in her rearview mirror. Blue and red, cutting through the golden evening light. A police car signaling her to pull over. Amara's heart sank. She hadn't been speeding. She knew she hadn't. She was always careful, especially in residential areas. Her mind raced through possibilities. Broken tail light? No, she'd just had the car serviced. Registration? Current insurance? Up to date. She signaled and pulled to the side of the road, her hands beginning to tremble slightly. She'd been through this before. Not often, but enough times to know how it could go. Taking a deep breath, she rolled down her window and placed both hands on the steering wheel where they could be clearly seen. Her phone was in the center console. She thought about reaching for it to record, but decided to wait. Don't make any sudden movements. In her side mirror, she watched the officer step out of his patrol car. He was a white man, probably in his early 40s, with a stocky build and a stern expression. His hand rested on his belt as he walked toward her car, and there was something in his posture that made her stomach tighten. The officer approached her window and leaned down slightly. His name tag read Matthews, license and registration, he said. No greeting, no explanation for why he'd pulled her over. Of course, officer, Amara replied, keeping her voice calm and professional. May I ask why you stopped me? Officer Matthews's jaw tightened. License and registration now. Amara felt a flash of anger but pushed it down. They're in my purse and glove compartment. I'm going to reach for them now. She moved slowly, deliberately, reaching first for her purse on the passenger seat. Her fingers found her wallet and she pulled out her driver's license. Then she opened the glove compartment and retrieved the registration papers. Matthews snatched them from her hand and studied them with narrowed eyes. He looked at her license, then at her face, then back at the license. His expression grew darker. This your car? He asked. Yes, sir. You sure about that? Amara felt her pulse quicken. Yes, I'm sure. As you can see from the registration, it's in my name. Matthews held up the registration paper, squinting at it like he was examining a forgery. Says here this vehicle is registered to an Amara Johnson. That's me, she said, pointing to her license still in his hand. He looked at her, then at the car, then back at her. There was disbelief written all across his face. You expect me to believe you own this car? This is a $200,000 vehicle. And there it was. The real reason for the stop Amara had been driving while black in an expensive car. I do own it, she said firmly. Is there a problem, officer? Matthews let out a short, harsh laugh. Yeah, there's a problem. People don't just drive around in cars like this. Where'd you really get it? This your boss's car? You borrow it without asking? The accusation hung in the air between them. Amara's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell him exactly who she was and what she did for a living. But she'd learned over the years that arguing with police officers during a stop rarely ended well. This is my car, she repeated, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her. I purchased it legally. I own it legally. Everything is in order. Step out of the vehicle, Matthews ordered. Why? What have I done wrong? Step out of the vehicle now or I'll charge you with obstruction. Amara's mind raced. She knew her rights, but she also knew that asserting them could make things worse. She thought about her phone in the center console. She needed to record this, but if she reached for it now, who knows what Matthews might do. I'm going to reach for my phone to call my attorney, she said carefully. You don't need an attorney. You need to do what I'm telling you and get out of the car. I have the right to record this interaction, Amara said. Her hand moved slowly toward the center console. Don't reach for anything, Matthews barked, his hand moving to his weapon. Amara froze. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. This was exactly the kind of situation she'd feared her entire life. One wrong move, one misunderstanding, and everything could go horribly wrong. "My phone," she said slowly, clearly, in the center console. "I'm going to get my phone to record this stop. I'm moving very slowly." Matthews watched her like a hawk as she carefully picked up her phone and held it up. She opened the camera app and started recording, making sure to capture his face and badge number. "You think you're smart?" Matthews sneered. "Recording me? I've got nothing to hide. You're the one acting suspicious driving a stolen vehicle." "This car is not stolen," Amara said, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. "You pulled me over for no reason, you've accused me of theft without any evidence, and you're threatening me. This is harassment." A few neighbors had started to come out of their houses, drawn by the flashing lights and raised voices. An elderly woman stood on her porch watching. A man walking his dog had stopped on the sidewalk. Matthews seemed to notice the growing audience, and it only made him angrier. "I'm calling for backup," he said, pulling out his radio. "Suspect is being uncooperative and maybe driving a stolen vehicle." Amara couldn't believe what she was hearing. Suspect, stolen vehicle? She had done absolutely nothing wrong, and yet here she was being treated like a criminal on the street where she lived. She kept her phone steady, recording everything. Her hands were shaking now, but not from fear, from fury. She had worked her entire life to get where she was. She had earned every degree, every promotion, every patent with her own intelligence and hard work. And none of it mattered to this man. All he saw was a black woman in an expensive car, and his mind had immediately jumped to theft. Another patrol car rounded the corner, lights flashing. As it pulled up behind Matthew's vehicle, Amara took a deep breath. She didn't know what was going to happen next, but she knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. She was Dr. Amara Johnson, chief engineer at one of the most innovative automotive companies in the country. She had designed the very car she was sitting in, and she wasn't going to let Officer Matthews or anyone else make her feel like she didn't belong in it. The second patrol car came to a stop behind Officer Matthews's vehicle, and Amara watched in her rearview mirror as another officer stepped out. This one was a woman, Asian American, probably in her mid-30s. She had a different energy about her, less aggressive, more observant. Matthews walked over to meet her, and Amara could see them talking, though she couldn't hear what they were saying. Matthews was gesturing animatedly toward her car, his face red, his movements sharp and aggressive. The female officer listened, her expression neutral, occasionally glancing over at Amara. Amara kept her phone recording, angling it to capture both officers. Her other hand remained visible on the steering wheel. More neighbors had come out now. She could see at least 5 people on their porches or standing in their yards watching. A couple of them had their phones out too. The female officer walked toward Amara's car. Her name tag read Chen. She approached the window with her hands relaxed at her sides, not touching her weapon. "Good evening, ma'am," Officer Chen said. Her voice was calm, professional. "I'm Officer Lisa Chen. Can you tell me what's going on here?" It was the first polite thing any police officer had said to her in the past 15 minutes. "I was driving home," Amara explained, trying to keep the frustration out of her voice. "Officer Matthews pulled me over. He didn't tell me why. He's accused me of driving a stolen vehicle, even though I've shown him my license and registration proving that I own this car." Officer Chen nodded slowly. "May I see your documents?" Amara handed them over. Chen studied them carefully, then looked at the car, then back at Amara. "Dr. Johnson," she said, reading from the license. "This address is just 2 blocks from here." "Yes, I live on Oak Avenue. I was almost home when I got pulled over." Matthews had walked back over, and he was clearly unhappy that Chen was having a civil conversation with Amara. "She's lying," he interrupted. "Nobody in this neighborhood drives a car like that. Look at her. You really think she can afford a vehicle worth more than most people's houses?" Chen's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Officer Matthews, the registration clearly shows it." "The registration could be fake," Matthews cut her off. "We need to verify this. Run the VIN number. Check for reported thefts." "I've already checked," Chen said quietly. "The car isn't reported stolen. The VIN matches the registration. Everything appears to be in order." Amara felt a small surge of relief. At least one of these officers was being reasonable. But Matthews wasn't done. "I want her out of the vehicle. I want to search it." "On what grounds?" Chen asked. There was an edge to her voice now. Probable cause. She's acting nervous, suspicious. Amara almost laughed. Of course she was nervous. She was being harassed by a police officer for no reason. I'm not consenting to any search, Amara said firmly. I know my rights. You have no probable cause. Matthew's face turned an even deeper shade of red. You're refusing to cooperate with a police investigation? There is no investigation, Amara shot back. You pulled me over without cause, you've accused me of theft without evidence, and now you want to violate my Fourth Amendment rights by searching my vehicle without a warrant or probable cause. I'm not refusing to cooperate. I'm exercising my constitutional rights. A few people in the growing crowd murmured their approval. One man called out, "Leave her alone. She hasn't done anything wrong." Matthews spun around, glaring at the crowd. Everyone stepped back. This is police business. Nobody moved. Chen stepped closer to Matthews and said something to him in a low voice that Amara couldn't hear. Whatever she said, it made Matthews even angrier. He yanked out his radio again. I need a supervisor at Maple Street and Fifth Avenue, he barked into it. Possible stolen vehicle, uncooperative suspect, crowd control situation. Amara's hands were shaking so badly now that she had to rest her phone on the dashboard to keep it steady. This was spiraling out of control. What had started as a simple traffic stop was turning into something much bigger, and she had no idea how it was going to end. Dr. Johnson, Officer Chen said, turning back to her. Do you have any other identification? Work ID, perhaps? Amara reached into her purse and pulled out her Apex Automotive Technologies employee badge. It had her photo, her name, and her title, Chief Engineer, Electric Powertrain Division. Chen studied it carefully. Her eyebrows rose slightly. You work at Apex? She asked. I don't just work there, Amara said. I'm the lead engineer. I designed this car. Well, not just me. I had a team, but I led the project. This is actually a prototype. There are only 5 of these models in existence right now. Matthews laughed. Actually laughed. You expect us to believe that? You're an engineer? At Apex Automotive? The way he said it with such contempt and disbelief made something snap inside Amara. Why is that so hard to believe? She demanded. Because I'm a woman? Or because I'm black? Don't play that card with me, Matthews snapped. This has nothing to do with race. Really? Then why did you pull me over? What traffic violation did I commit? What gave you probable cause to stop me? Matthews opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Chen, then back at Amara. Your taillight is out, he finally said. No, it isn't, Amara replied. My car was serviced 3 days ago. Every light was checked and working. Well, I saw a broken taillight. Then check it, Amara challenged. Go ahead. Check my taillights right now. Matthews walked to the back of her car. Amara adjusted her phone to capture him. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the taillights. Both were working perfectly, their LED arrays glowing bright red in the gathering dusk. He didn't say a word about them. Instead, he walked back to the driver's window. Your window tint is too dark. That's a violation. The tint is factory standard, Amara said. It's within legal limits. It was approved by the Department of Transportation. Matthews was grasping at straws now, and everyone watching knew it. A third patrol car pulled up. This one had supervisor written on the side. A woman in her 50s stepped out, her uniform crisp, her expression all business. She had silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, and the kind of presence that immediately commanded attention. Matthews visibly relaxed. Clearly he thought his supervisor would back him up. The supervisor walked over to Chen first. They spoke quietly for a moment, Chen gesturing toward Amara's car and then at Matthews. The supervisor's expression grew more serious with each word. Then she walked over to Amara's window. Good evening, ma'am. I'm Sergeant Rodriguez. I apologize for the inconvenience. Can you tell me what happened here? For the third time, Amara explained the situation. As she spoke, Sergeant Rodriguez's face grew harder and harder. When Amara finished, Rodriguez turned to Matthews. Officer Matthews, what violation did you observe that initiated this traffic stop? Matthews hesitated. I thought I saw a broken taillight. You thought? It looked broken from a distance. Rodriguez walked to the back of the car and examined the taillights herself. She walked back to Matthews with a look that could freeze fire. Those taillights are functioning perfectly. What else? She seemed suspicious. Suspicious how? Matthews struggled to find words. Just the way she was driving. And the car. It's an expensive car and this is a residential neighborhood. He trailed off as he realized how terrible that sounded. Rodriguez looked at him for a long, cold moment. Then she turned to Amara. Dr. Johnson, you're free to go. I apologize for this stop. You've done nothing wrong. Amara felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back. She wasn't going to cry. Not here. Not now. Thank you, Sergeant, she said. As Rodriguez handed back her license and registration, she added quietly, I recommend filing a formal complaint with our department. This should not have happened. Amara nodded. Oh, she was definitely filing a complaint. And that was just the beginning. She put her car in drive and slowly pulled away from the curb, very aware that 3 police cars and a dozen neighbors were watching her leave. Her hands were still shaking. Her heart was still racing. But as she turned onto her street and saw her house waiting for her, she made herself a promise. This wasn't over. Not even close. Amara sat in her driveway for 10 minutes after pulling in, just breathing. Her hands were still trembling and her mind was racing with everything that had just happened. She wanted to cry. She wanted to scream. She wanted to punch something. Instead, she picked up her phone and called her best friend. Nicole, you're not going to believe what just happened, she said when Nicole answered. 20 minutes later, Nicole was sitting on Amara's couch, shaking her head in disbelief as Amara recounted the entire incident. He actually accused you of stealing your own car, Nicole asked. He didn't even try to hide it, Amara said. She was pacing now, too agitated to sit still. He took one look at me, looked at my car, and decided there was no way I could possibly own it. Like it was impossible for a black woman to be successful enough to afford a nice car. Nicole reached for Amara's phone. Can I see the video? Amara handed it over and watched Nicole's face as she played back the recording. Nicole's expression went from shock to anger to outrage. This is insane, Nicole breathed. Amara, you need to do something about this. You can't let this go. I'm not planning to, Amara said. I'm going to file a complaint first thing tomorrow morning. No, Nicole said firmly. You're going to do more than that. This video needs to be seen. People need to know this is still happening. Amara hesitated. She wasn't sure she wanted her face plastered all over social media. She was a private person. She liked her quiet life, her work, her small circle of friends, but Nicole was right. If she stayed quiet, nothing would change. Matthews would keep doing this to other people. Maybe someone who didn't have the resources she had. Someone who couldn't fight back. Okay, she said finally. But I want to talk to a lawyer first. Make sure I'm doing this the right way. Nicole nodded. I know someone. Civil rights attorney. Really good. I'll text you her number. That night, Amara barely slept. She kept replaying the stop in her mind, thinking of all the things she could have said, all the ways it could have gone worse. What if she hadn't been so calm? What if she'd gotten angry? What if Matthews had decided to escalate things further? The next morning, she called the attorney Nicole had recommended. Her name was Patricia Okonkwo, and she listened to Amara's story without interrupting once. Do you still have the video? Patricia asked when Amara finished. Yes, and it's backed up in 3 different places. Good, send it to me. I want to review it before we proceed. An hour later, Patricia called back. Dr. Johnson, this is one of the clearest cases of racial profiling I've seen in years. That officer had absolutely no legal justification for that stop. We have a strong case. They spent the next 2 hours on the phone going over Amara's options. File a complaint with Internal Affairs. File a civil lawsuit. Go to the media. Or all 3. Amara chose all 3. Patricia helped her draft a formal complaint to the police department. It was detailed, specific, and backed up by video evidence. They submitted it that afternoon. Then Patricia reached out to a few local news stations she had relationships with. 2 of them were interested immediately. By that evening, Amara was sitting in front of a camera, telling her story to a reporter from Channel 7 News. I'm not doing this for attention, she said, looking directly into the camera. I'm doing this because this kind of thing happens every day to people who look like me. We get pulled over for no reason. We get questioned. We get treated like criminals just for existing in spaces that some people think we don't belong in. And I'm tired of it. The reporter, a young woman named Kelly, nodded sympathetically. What do you want people to know about what happened to you? Amara thought for a moment. I want people to know that I earned everything I have. I have a PhD from MIT. I have 47 patents in automotive engineering. I led the team that designed one of the most advanced electric vehicles on the market today. And none of that mattered to Officer Matthews. All he saw was my skin color. All he saw was someone he thought didn't belong. The segment aired that night at 10 o'clock. Within an hour, it had been shared hundreds of times on social media. By morning, it had gone viral. Amara woke up to thousands of notifications on her phone, messages of support, shares, comments. Her inbox was flooded with emails from reporters wanting interviews, from civil rights organizations offering help, from complete strangers sharing their own stories of being racially profiled. It was overwhelming, but it was also validating. For years, she'd been dealing with microaggressions and subtle racism in her field. People who assumed she was an assistant instead of an engineer. Colleagues who questioned her qualifications. Clients who asked to speak to someone else. Assuming a young black woman couldn't possibly be the lead on a major automotive project, she'd learned to brush it off, to prove herself through her work, to let her achievements speak for themselves. But this was different. This was blatant, undeniable, and caught on video. Her phone rang. It was her boss, the CEO of Apex Automotive, a man named David Chen. "Amara, I just saw the news," he said. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she replied, though she wasn't sure that was entirely true. "I want you to know that the entire company stands behind you. What happened to you is unacceptable, and we're going to support you in whatever way we can." Later that day, Apex Automotive released an official statement. It condemned the traffic stop. It praised Amara's work and accomplishments. It announced that the company would be donating to organizations fighting racial profiling and police misconduct. The story was picked up by national news outlets, CNN, MSNBC, even some international papers. Amara's face was everywhere. The video of her traffic stop was being analyzed by legal experts on television. Activists were using her case as an example of systemic racism in policing. The police department released their own statement, saying they took the allegations seriously and were conducting a thorough investigation. But Amara wanted more than statements. She wanted accountability. That's when she decided to do something she'd been thinking about since the night of the traffic stop. Something that would prove once and for all exactly who she was and what she was capable of. She called Officer Matthews' supervisor, Sergeant Rodriguez, and made an unusual request. "I want to meet with Officer Matthews," she said. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Dr. Johnson, I'm not sure that's appropriate given the ongoing investigation." "I don't want to confront him," Amara explained. "I want to show him something. I want to show him my car. The real car, the engineering behind it. I want him to understand exactly what he was looking at when he pulled me over." Another pause. "Let me see what I can arrange," Rodriguez finally said. 3 days later, Amara found herself in the parking lot of Apex Automotive's headquarters, standing next to her car. Officer Matthews was there, accompanied by Sergeant Rodriguez. He looked uncomfortable, his eyes not quite meeting hers. Also present was Officer Chen, who had been respectful during the stop, and Patricia, her attorney. "Thank you for coming," Amara said, her voice professional and cool. "I asked you here because I wanted you to understand something. This car isn't just an expensive vehicle. It's a technological marvel, and I designed most of it." She opened the driver's door and gestured to the dashboard. "This is a custom interface that I developed. It uses biometric recognition. Watch." She placed her hand on the dashboard and the entire display lit up with information, speed settings, battery levels, diagnostic data, and right there in the center of the screen in bright letters, "Welcome Dr. Amara Johnson, Chief Engineer, Apex Automotive Technologies." Matthews stared at the screen, his face unreadable. "The car won't start without my biometric signature," Amara continued. "Fingerprint, voice recognition, or facial scan. It's a security system I designed to prevent theft." "Ironic, isn't it?" She walked to the front of the car and opened the hood. "This is the electric powertrain, completely custom designed. We're using a new type of battery cell that increases range by 40% compared to competitors. I hold the patent on the cooling system that makes it possible." She showed them the motor assembly, the battery pack, the regenerative braking system. She explained each component in simple terms, making it clear that she knew every detail because she had created it. Matthew stood there silently through the entire demonstration. When she finished, he cleared his throat. I didn't know," he said quietly. "You didn't ask," Amara replied. "You saw me and you made assumptions. You decided who I was and what I was capable of based on nothing but the color of my skin. Matthews looked down at his feet. I'm not telling you this to humiliate you, Amara said. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand the impact of what you did. You didn't just pull me over for no reason. You treated me like a criminal. You tried to search my car. You called for backup like I was dangerous. And all because you couldn't imagine that someone who looks like me could possibly have earned something like this. She gestured to the car. I worked my entire life to get here. Do you have any idea how hard it is to be a black woman in engineering? How many times I've had to prove myself? How many people have doubted me, dismissed me, assumed I wasn't qualified? And I did it anyway. I earned 3 degrees. I published research. I built a career. And you almost destroyed my sense of safety in 5 minutes on a random Tuesday evening. The video of Amara's demonstration with her car spread even faster than the original traffic stop footage. People were amazed not just by the injustice of what had happened, but by who Amara actually was. Comments poured in from all over the world. This woman is a genius and she was treated like a criminal. How many more times does this need to happen before something changes? She literally built the car and he accused her of stealing it. You can't make this up. The police department's internal affairs division moved quickly. They had no choice. The public pressure was immense. The video evidence was clear. And now, with Amara's credentials and accomplishments being broadcast everywhere, they couldn't sweep this under the rug. 2 weeks after the traffic stop, Amara received a call from the head of internal affairs, a lieutenant named James Foster. Dr. Johnson, I want to update you on our investigation, he said. We've completed our initial review and I think you should know what we found. Amara put the call on speaker so Patricia, who was with her, could hear. Officer Matthews has a history of complaints, Foster continued. This isn't the first time his conduct has been questioned. In the past 5 years, he's had 12 complaints filed against him. 11 of those complaints were from people of color. Amara felt her stomach drop. 12 complaints. And he was still on the street, still pulling people over, still harassing innocent citizens. Why wasn't anything done? She asked, her voice tight with anger. Foster sighed. That's a good question, and it's one we're asking ourselves now. Some of those complaints were deemed unsubstantiated. Others resulted in written warnings. One led to a short suspension. But clearly, our disciplinary procedures weren't adequate. Weren't adequate, Amara repeated. 12 complaints, 11 from people of color, and nobody saw a pattern. Nobody thought maybe this officer shouldn't be interacting with the public. You're right, Foster said. The system failed, we failed. And I'm sorry. What happens now? Patricia asked, speaking for the first time. Officer Matthews has been placed on administrative leave while we complete our investigation. We're reviewing all of his previous stops, looking for other potential cases of misconduct. And we're recommending termination. Amara should have felt satisfied, but all she felt was tired and sad. Because even if Matthews was fired, how many other officers like him were still out there? How many other departments had the same broken system that let officers with pattern of complaints continue working? The story continued to dominate local news. Then it went national. Amara found herself being interviewed on major television networks, being quoted in newspapers, being invited to speak at conferences. She didn't want to be famous. She wanted to be an engineer. But she realized she had a platform now, and she could use it to make a difference. Support came from unexpected places. Other engineers, both black and white, reached out to share their own stories of discrimination. Students wrote to tell her she was their inspiration. Parents sent messages thanking her for standing up. But there was also backlash. Anonymous messages filled with hate. People who claimed she was playing the race card, that she was exaggerating, that the officer had every right to pull her over. Some people even suggested she had staged the whole thing for attention. Amara learned quickly not to read the comments section. Her colleagues at Apex Automotive were incredibly supportive. They organized a rally at the company headquarters, standing in solidarity with her. The CEO, David Chen, spoke passionately about the need for change, not just in policing but in all areas of society. Dr. Johnson is one of the most talented engineers I've ever had the privilege of working with, he told the assembled crowd of employees and reporters. She's broken barriers in an industry that hasn't always welcomed people who look like her. And the fact that she can accomplish all of that and still be treated like a suspect just for driving her own car shows how much work we still have to do, the company announced. They were creating a scholarship fund in Amara's name, specifically for young black women interested in STEM fields. They committed $1 million to start. Amara was moved to tears when she heard about it. She'd never expected this. She'd just wanted to drive home from work in peace. Civil rights organizations reached out, asking if they could use her case to push for broader police reform. Amara agreed. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who had been profiled, harassed, or worse. The local NAACP chapter organized a town hall meeting about racial profiling in policing. Amara was invited to speak. So was Sergeant Rodriguez, who had shown up that night and let her go. The high school gymnasium was packed. Hundreds of people filled the seats, with more standing along the walls. The energy in the room was intense, a mixture of anger and hope and determination. When it was Amara's turn to speak, she walked to the podium with her heart pounding. Public speaking had never been her strength. She was better with equations than with words. But she had something to say, and people needed to hear it. 3 weeks ago, I was pulled over while driving home from work, she began. I hadn't committed any crime. I hadn't violated any traffic law. But I was stopped, questioned, accused of theft, and threatened, all because an officer looked at me and decided I didn't belong in my own car. The crowd murmured in recognition. How many people in this room had experienced something similar? I'm lucky, Amara continued. I had the resources to fight back. I had a lawyer. I had a supportive employer. I had a platform that people paid attention to. But what about all the people who don't have those things? What about the people who get pulled over and harassed and don't have video evidence? What about the people who are afraid to speak up because they don't think anyone will listen? She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. This has to stop. We need real accountability for officers who abuse their power. We need better training on implicit bias and racial profiling. We need civilian oversight. We need body cameras on every officer every time. And we need consequences when officers violate people's rights. The crowd erupted in applause. When Sergeant Rodriguez spoke, she was surprisingly candid. I've been a police officer for 23 years, she said, and I've seen things I'm not proud of. I've seen officers make assumptions based on race. I've seen complaints get buried. I've seen good people driven out of the force while problematic officers stay on. And I've been part of the problem by not speaking up loudly enough. She looked directly at Amara. What happened to Dr. Johnson should never have happened, and I commit to you all that I will work to make sure it doesn't happen again in our department. But I can't do it alone. We need systemic change. After the town hall, Amara was surrounded by people wanting to thank her, to share their stories, to ask for advice. An elderly woman hugged her and whispered, "My son was killed in a traffic stop 10 years ago. Thank you for fighting." Amara hugged her back, tears streaming down her face. A teenage girl approached shyly. "I want to be an engineer like you," she said. "But sometimes I wonder if I'm smart enough, or if people will take me seriously." Amara knelt down to look the girl in the eyes. "You are smart enough," she said firmly. "Don't ever let anyone make you doubt that. And yes, some people won't take you seriously. They'll underestimate you. But that's their problem, not yours. You prove them wrong by being excellent." The girl smiled. And Amara saw herself 15 years ago, uncertain but determined. In the weeks that followed, the police department announced a series of reforms: mandatory bias training for all officers, a new early warning system to flag officers with multiple complaints, the creation of a civilian review board with real power to investigate misconduct. Officer Matthews was fired. The official statement cited a pattern of discriminatory conduct and violation of department policies. It was a victory. But Amara knew it was just the beginning. She received a letter in the mail one day, handwritten on plain white paper. It was from one of the neighbors who had witnessed her traffic stop. "Dear Dr. Johnson," it read, "I watched what happened to you that night, and I was ashamed that I didn't do more to help. I should have said something louder. I should have intervened. But I was afraid. I'm writing to tell you that I'm not afraid anymore. Your courage has inspired me to speak up when I see injustice. Thank you for that." Amara taped the letter to her bathroom mirror where she would see it every morning, a reminder that even in the darkest moments there was hope. Even when the system failed, there were people willing to stand up and demand better. She went back to work at Apex, throwing herself into her projects. The new electric SUV was in its final testing phase, and there were 100 small problems to solve. It felt good to focus on something concrete, something she could control. But she didn't forget. She couldn't forget. Because every time she drove her car, every time she saw a police cruiser in her rearview mirror, she felt that spike of fear, and she knew that until real lasting change happened, she would always feel it. So she kept speaking up, kept telling her story, kept pushing for reform, because if she could use what happened to her to make things better for even one other person, it would be worth it, and maybe, just maybe, one day a young black woman would be able to drive an expensive car without being treated like a criminal. That was a future worth fighting for. The media attention brought Amara's entire life story into the spotlight, whether she wanted it there or not. Journalists dug into her background, interviewed her old professors, talked to her colleagues. Within days, the world knew the full story of how Dr. Amara Johnson had become one of the leading automotive engineers in the country. But they didn't know everything. They didn't know about the 11-year-old girl who stayed up late doing math problems by flashlight because the electricity had been shut off again. They didn't know about the teenager who worked 2 part-time jobs to help her single mother pay rent while maintaining a perfect grade point average. Those stories came out during a long-form interview with a journalist from a major magazine. Amara sat in her living room drinking tea, finally ready to share the whole journey. "I grew up in West Baltimore," she began. "My mom worked 3 jobs. Dad left when I was 5. We didn't have much, but Mom made sure I always had books. The library was my second home," she smiled, remembering. The librarian, Mrs. Washington, she noticed I loved books about how things worked. Machines, buildings, cars. She started saving engineering books for me. Some of them were way too advanced, but I read them anyway. I didn't understand everything, but I wanted to. In 4th grade, Amara's teacher entered her in a regional science fair. She'd built a simple bridge out of popsicle sticks and explained the physics of weight distribution. She won first place and $50. "I gave the money to my mom," Amara said, "but the prize wasn't the money. It was this engineer from Johns Hopkins who was one of the judges. He told me I had a real talent. He said if I kept working hard, I could do anything I wanted." That engineer, Dr. Raymond Price, became her mentor. He helped her apply for a summer program for gifted students in STEM. She was one of only 3 black students in the program, and the only girl. That was my first real taste of being different, Amara recalled. Some of the other kids were nice, but some of them made it clear they didn't think I belonged there. One boy told me I was only accepted because of affirmative action. I was 12 years old. Instead of discouraging her, it made her more determined. She studied harder, asked more questions, stayed late in the lab. By the end of the summer, she'd built a working model of a solar-powered car. High school brought new challenges. Her school didn't have advanced math classes, so Dr. Price arranged for her to take courses at a local community college. She rode 2 buses each way, leaving before dawn and getting home after dark. "My mom was worried about me traveling alone like that," Amara said, "but she also knew I needed the challenge. She told me, 'You're going to have to work twice as hard to get half as much. That's not fair, but that's the world. So you work 3 times as hard and take everything they've got.'" She paused, her eyes glistening with tears. "My mom passed away 2 years ago. She never got to see me become chief engineer. But she saw me graduate from MIT. That was enough for her. MIT had been a dream and a struggle. Amara got in with a full scholarship, but being there was overwhelming at first. I'd never been around so many wealthy people," she admitted. "My classmates talked about their prep schools and their family vacations in Europe. I was just trying to figure out how to afford winter boots." She was often the only black woman in her classes. Professors sometimes mistook her for a lost undergraduate when she showed up for graduate seminars. Study groups formed without her. One teaching assistant told her she might be more comfortable in a less demanding program. "I thought about quitting so many times," Amara said, "especially that first year. But then I'd remember all the people who believed in me. Mrs. Washington, Dr. Price, my mom. I couldn't let them down." She threw herself into her research, focusing on electric vehicle technology long before it was trendy. Her dissertation on battery efficiency was published in 3 major engineering journals. She graduated with honors and had 5 job offers. She chose Apex Automotive because they were doing innovative work in electric powertrains. She was the first black woman engineer they'd ever hired. "My first day, someone assumed I was there to interview for a secretary position," Amara said with a bitter laugh. "I corrected them. But it happened again, and again. At meetings, people would ask me to get coffee or take notes even though I was the engineer leading the project. She dealt with constant microaggressions, colleagues who questioned her calculations, clients who asked to speak to someone more senior, a supervisor who suggested she might be more comfortable in a support role rather than leading projects. I documented everything, Amara said. Every comment, every time I was passed over, every time my work was attributed to someone else. I built an ironclad case, and when I went to HR, I had 3 years of evidence. The company responded by promoting her, not because they wanted to, she suspected, but because they were afraid of a lawsuit. But once she was in that leadership position, she proved she deserved to be there. Her battery cooling system patent changed the industry. Her work on regenerative braking improved efficiency by 30%. She led the team that designed Apex's flagship electric vehicle, which won awards and sold beyond projections. And through it all, she mentored other young engineers, especially women and people of color. She made sure they got credit for their work. She fought for their promotions. She created the opportunities she wished she'd had. While Amara's story was being told, journalists also dug into Officer Matthews's background. What they found was troubling. Matthews had been with the police department for 18 years. His personnel file, obtained through public records requests, painted a picture of a man who should have been let go years ago. His first complaint came in his 3rd year on the force. A black man accused him of using excessive force during a routine traffic stop. The complaint was investigated and deemed unsubstantiated due to lack of evidence beyond the complainant's word. Over the years, more complaints followed. A Latino family said he harassed them at a neighborhood gathering. An Asian student accused him of stopping her repeatedly near her college campus. A black business owner said Matthews questioned his right to be in his own store. The pattern was clear to anyone who looked. But apparently no one in the department had looked closely enough, or cared enough to do anything about it. Former colleagues of Matthews were interviewed. Some defended him, saying he was just doing his job in a tough neighborhood. Others were more honest. Derek had issues, one retired officer said, speaking anonymously. He'd make comments about certain people, certain neighborhoods. Nothing you could really report, you know? Just attitudes. But we all knew he saw people differently based on their skin color. A former partner of Matthews told a reporter, "I requested a different assignment after 6 months. I didn't like the way he treated people. He'd pull over nice cars driven by black folks and find some excuse. Broken taillight, improper lane change, something. I told my supervisor I was uncomfortable, but nothing changed." The police chief faced tough questions at a press conference. Why hadn't the pattern been recognized? Why hadn't Matthews been disciplined more seriously? Why was he allowed to keep working despite so many complaints? The chief, a career officer named Maria Rodriguez, no relation to Sergeant Rodriguez, looked tired and defensive. "We have policies in place to address complaints," she said. But clearly those policies were not adequate. We failed to connect the dots. We failed to see the pattern. And we failed the community we're supposed to serve. She announced that the department would be conducting a comprehensive review of all officers with multiple complaints. They would be implementing a new early warning system. They would require body cameras for all officers. They would create a civilian oversight board. But most importantly, Chief Rodriguez said, we need to change our culture. We need to acknowledge that bias exists, even among officers who think they're treating everyone fairly, and we need to do better. It was a start. But for many in the community, it wasn't enough. They'd heard promises before. They'd seen reforms announced and then quietly abandoned when the media attention faded. A local activist named Thomas Green organized a series of community meetings to discuss police reform. Hundreds of people attended, sharing their own stories of being profiled, harassed, or worse. Amara attended one of these meetings. She sat in the back listening to story after story that echoed her own experience. A father who was pulled over while driving his kids to school. A young man who was stopped and frisked on his way to work. A grandmother who was questioned about why she was in this neighborhood when she'd lived there for 40 years. "We can't let this moment pass," Thomas told the crowd. "We have the city's attention. We have the media's attention. We need to push for real, lasting change while we have this opportunity." Amara found herself nodding. He was right. Her traffic stop had opened a door, but it was up to all of them to walk through it and demand the change they deserved. After the meeting, Thomas approached her. "Dr. Johnson, I know you didn't ask to become the face of this movement," he said. But you are. People are listening to you. Will you help us push for reform? Amara thought about everything she'd been through. The years of proving herself. The exhaustion of always having to be twice as good. The fear she'd felt during that traffic stop. 2 months after the traffic stop, Police Chief Maria Rodriguez called a press conference. The room was packed with reporters, community leaders, activists, and concerned citizens. Amara sat in the front row, flanked by Patricia, her attorney, and Thomas Green from the community organizing group. Chief Rodriguez looked different than she had at previous press conferences. More serious, more determined. She stepped up to the podium and didn't waste time with pleasantries. Today, I'm announcing the results of our internal investigation into the traffic stop of Dr. Amara Johnson, as well as our broader review of department practices, she began. The room went silent. Officer Derek Matthews has been terminated from the police department, effective immediately. Our investigation found clear evidence of racial profiling, abuse of authority, and violation of department policies. Furthermore, we discovered that Officer Matthews had a documented pattern of similar behavior that was not adequately addressed by our disciplinary system. A murmur went through the crowd. Amara felt Patricia squeeze her hand. But this isn't just about one officer, Rodriguez continued. This is about a system that failed, a culture that didn't take complaints seriously enough, a department that didn't recognize patterns when we should have. She outlined a series of reforms, mandatory implicit bias training for all officers, not just a one-time thing but ongoing education, a new early intervention system that would flag officers with multiple complaints and require immediate review, body cameras for every officer, to be worn and activated during all public interactions. We're also creating a civilian oversight board with real power, Rodriguez said. Not just an advisory committee, but a board that can investigate complaints, review use of force incidents, and make binding recommendations for discipline. The activists in the room nodded approvingly, but Amara could tell some of them were skeptical. They'd heard promises before. Rodriguez seemed to sense this. I know many of you don't trust us right now. I know we've lost credibility in the community. These reforms are just the beginning. We're committed to transparency, accountability, and rebuilding the trust that we've broken. After the press conference, reporters swarmed Amara asking for her reaction. It's a good start, she said carefully. But real change isn't about press conferences and policy announcements. It's about what happens on the streets every single day. It's about whether officers actually change their behavior. It's about whether the department follows through on these commitments. That same day, Apex Automotive made an announcement of their own. CEO David Chen stood in front of the company headquarters, surrounded by employees and media. Dr. Amara Johnson represents everything we value at Apex, he said. Excellence, innovation, perseverance. What happened to her is unacceptable. And while we're proud of the police department's response, we believe the private sector has a role to play in addressing systemic inequality. He announced a major initiative. Apex would be creating a scholarship fund, starting with $5 million to support young women of color pursuing degrees in STEM fields, full tuition, room and board, plus internship opportunities at Apex. We're calling it the Amara Johnson STEM Scholars Program, Chen said, because Dr. Johnson's story shouldn't be rare. It should be common, and we're going to do our part to make that happen. Amara had known about the scholarship program, but not about the name. When Chen told her beforehand, she'd cried. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming feeling that something good was coming out of something so painful. At the announcement, she spoke briefly. When I was in high school riding 2 buses to take college classes because my school didn't offer them, I never imagined I'd be where I am today. I had help along the way, mentors who believed in me, teachers who pushed me, programs that gave me opportunities. This scholarship will do that for other girls who have the talent and the drive, but need someone to open the door. The response was immediate and powerful. Other companies announced similar programs. Tech firms, engineering companies, automotive manufacturers. Within a week, over $20 million had been pledged to scholarships and mentorship programs for underrepresented students in STEM. But while Amara's story was inspiring change in the corporate world, the fight for police reform was harder. The police union pushed back against some of the proposed changes. They argued that body cameras were expensive and violated officers' privacy. They claimed that the Civilian Oversight Board would undermine the chain of command and make it harder for officers to do their jobs. Community meetings became heated. Officers stood up and said they were being vilified for the actions of one bad cop. Community members countered that Matthews wasn't one bad cop. He was part of a systemic problem. Amara attended these meetings, often sitting quietly and listening. One night, a young officer stood up, his voice shaking with emotion. "I became a cop to help people," he said. "I grew up in this community. I know what it's like to feel unsafe, to not trust police. I wanted to be different. I wanted to be the kind of officer people could trust. And now I feel like I'm being lumped in with people like Matthews, and it's not fair." Before anyone else could respond, Amara raised her hand. The moderator called on her. "I hear you," she said to the young officer. "And you're right, it's not fair. But do you know what else isn't fair? Being pulled over for no reason. Being treated like a criminal because of the color of your skin. Being afraid every time you see police lights in your rearview mirror." She stood up so she could look him in the eye. "The reforms we're asking for, they protect good officers like you. Body cameras protect you when someone makes a false accusation. Better training helps you recognize your own biases, so you don't make the mistakes Matthews made. A fair disciplinary system means when you do the right thing, you're not covering for officers who do the wrong thing." The young officer nodded slowly. "We're not against police," Amara continued, now addressing the whole room. "We're against police misconduct. We're against a system that lets bad officers hide behind good ones. We want the same thing you want: safe communities and fair treatment. We just have different experiences of whether that currently exists." Her words seemed to shift something in the room. The conversation became more productive, more focused on solutions rather than blame. Thomas Green worked with Amara and other community leaders to draft a comprehensive reform proposal. They presented it to the city council, with specific recommendations and timelines. Not everyone was happy with Amara's growing prominence in the reform movement. She received hate mail, angry emails, even threats. Someone spray-painted her car one night with a racial slur. She filed a police report, and ironically, the officers who responded were professional and sympathetic. "We're not all like Matthews," one of them told her. "Some of us really are trying to do better." Amara wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe change was possible. The hardest part was the emotional toll. Every time she spoke publicly about the traffic stop, she had to relive it. Every interview, every speech, every conversation brought back that feeling of fear and helplessness. She started seeing a therapist, something she probably should have done weeks earlier. "You've been through a trauma," her therapist, Dr. Williams, explained. "Not just the traffic stop itself, but everything that came after. The public scrutiny, the pressure to be a symbol, the responsibility you feel to create change. That's a heavy burden." Amara broke down in that first session, crying harder than she had since the night of the traffic stop. All the strength she'd been projecting, all the composure she'd maintained in public, it all crumbled in the safety of Dr. Williams's office. "I'm tired," she admitted. "I just wanted to be an engineer. I didn't ask to be an activist." "You can be both," Dr. Williams said gently, "but you need to take care of yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup." Amara started setting boundaries. She limited interviews to one per week. She said no to speaking engagements that didn't feel right. She took weekends off from social media to protect her mental health. And she went back to what she loved: engineering. The new SUV was in final production, and there were exciting challenges to solve. Working on the technical problems, the math and physics and design, it centered her. It reminded her who she was beyond this moment of crisis. 3 months after the traffic stop, the city council voted on the reform package. It passed with strong support from both community members and, surprisingly, from several police officers who testified in favor of it. The vote wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Implementation would take time. Culture change would take even longer. But it was progress. Amara attended the council meeting where the vote took place. When it passed, people cheered. Thomas hugged her. Patricia smiled proudly, and Amara felt something she hadn't felt in months: hope. Real, genuine hope that things could get better. That night, she drove home in her car, the same car that had started this whole journey. She passed a police cruiser at a stoplight. The officer glanced at her car, then at her, and nodded respectfully before driving on. It was a small moment. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe that officer would have nodded at anyone, but maybe, just maybe, it meant that her voice had been heard. that her fight had mattered, and for tonight that was enough. The formal disciplinary hearing for Derek Matthews was scheduled for a cold morning in November, 5 months after the traffic stop. The hearing room in the municipal building was smaller than Amara had expected, with fluorescent lights that buzzed softly and rows of chairs that were already filled when she arrived. Patricia sat beside her, reviewing notes one last time. Across the aisle, Matthews sat with his union representative and an attorney. He looked older than Amara remembered, his face drawn and pale. He didn't look at her when she came in. The hearing board consisted of 3 people, a retired judge, the deputy police chief, and a community representative chosen by the Civilian Oversight Board. They sat behind a long table at the front of the room, looking stern and official. The proceedings started promptly at 9. The board chairperson, the retired judge named Catherine Morrison, explained the format. Evidence would be presented. Witnesses would testify. Matthews would have the opportunity to respond. Then the board would deliberate and announce their decision. The department's attorney went first, laying out the case against Matthews. The traffic stop video was played on a large screen. Even months later, watching it made Amara's stomach clench. She heard Matthews's voice accusing her of theft, saw the aggression in his body language, felt again that spike of fear. Several people in the gallery gasped at parts they found particularly egregious. Matthews stared at the table in front of him. Then came the documentation of Matthews's history. 12 complaints over 5 years. The attorney displayed them one by one on the screen. A damning pattern of behavior. A Latino man named Carlos Rodriguez testified about being pulled over 3 times in 2 months. Always by Matthews, always in the same neighborhood where he worked. He told me I didn't belong there, Carlos said. He said people like me were making the neighborhood worse. I'm a physical therapist. I work at the clinic on 5th Street. But he saw me and assumed I was a gangbanger or a drug dealer. An Asian American college student named Jennifer Kim described being stopped repeatedly near her campus. Officer Matthews said students shouldn't be driving expensive cars, that I must have gotten it from drug money or from a boyfriend, she testified. The car was a gift from my parents for graduating high school with honors. But he didn't ask about that. He just assumed. A black business owner named Andre Washington testified about Matthews questioning his right to be in his own store. I was closing up for the night, and he rolled up, asked what I was doing. Andre said. I told him I owned the place. He demanded proof. I showed him my business license, my ID, my keys. He still made me stand outside while he checked everything. Made me feel like a criminal in front of my own business. After each testimony, Matthews' attorney tried to poke holes in their stories. Were they sure about the dates? Could they prove Matthews' motivation? Wasn't it possible these were legitimate stops? But the pattern was too clear, too consistent. Then it was time for Officer Lisa Chen to testify. She walked to the witness chair, looking uncomfortable but determined. I arrived as backup that evening, she began. When I got there, Officer Matthews told me he'd pulled over a suspect in a possibly stolen vehicle. But when I looked at the situation, nothing seemed right. She described how Matthews had no legitimate reason for the stop, how Amara's documents were all in order, how Matthews seemed fixated on the idea that Amara couldn't possibly own the car. I should have intervened sooner, Chen said, her voice tight with emotion. I should have told him to let her go. I didn't, and I regret that. I was thinking about department loyalty, about not undermining another officer in the field. But I should have been thinking about doing the right thing. Her honesty was striking. Several board members nodded as she spoke. Matthews' attorney tried to frame Chen's testimony as a fellow officer, throwing him under the bus to save her own career. But Chen stood firm. I'm testifying because what happened that night was wrong, she said. And if we don't acknowledge when we're wrong, we can't fix the problem. Finally, it was Amara's turn to testify. She walked to the witness chair with her heart pounding. Patricia had prepared her for this, had gone over potential questions, had reminded her to stay calm and factual. But when she sat down and looked at Matthews across the room, all the preparation fled her mind. This was the man who had made her feel unsafe in her own neighborhood, who had treated her like a criminal for no reason, who represented everything she'd been fighting against her entire life. The department's attorney asked her to describe the events of that evening. Amara took a deep breath and began. I was driving home from work. I hadn't committed any violation, But Officer Matthews pulled me over. He immediately demanded my license and registration without explanation. When I asked why I'd been stopped, he became aggressive. She described the escalation, the accusations, the way Matthews had refused to believe she owned her own car. He didn't see an engineer driving home from work, Amara said. He saw a black woman in an expensive car and immediately assumed something illegal was happening. That assumption, that bias, it's what led to everything that followed. Matthews' attorney tried to challenge her interpretation. Isn't it possible Officer Matthews had legitimate concerns? Expensive vehicles are sometimes stolen. Perhaps he was just being thorough. Amara looked directly at the attorney. Then why didn't he check the VIN number immediately? Why didn't he run my license plate before pulling me over? Why did he call for backup and tell them he had a suspect in a stolen vehicle before he'd done any actual investigation? I'll tell you why. Because he'd already decided I was guilty. He looked at my skin color and made his decision. The attorney tried another angle. Dr. Johnson, you're a successful woman. You've achieved a great deal. Isn't it possible you're oversensitive to racial issues because of your experiences? The question hung in the air. Amara felt her anger rising but forced herself to stay calm. I'm not oversensitive, she said quietly. I'm experienced. I've spent my entire career being underestimated because of how I look. I know the difference between a legitimate question and bias. What happened that night was bias, pure and simple. Patricia asked if she could speak to the impact of the incident. Every time I drive my car now, I feel anxious, Amara said. Every time I see police lights, even if they're not for me, my heart races. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I've never been arrested. I've never even had a speeding ticket. But I've been made to feel like I'm always one traffic stop away from being treated like a suspect. She paused, collecting herself. This isn't just about me. It's about every person of color who's been profiled. Every parent who has to give their children the talk about how to survive a police encounter. Every talented person who's been told they don't belong somewhere because of how they look. This has to stop. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the gallery. The board took a short recess. Then Matthews was given the opportunity to speak. He stood up slowly, looking older and more tired than ever. His attorney had clearly prepared a statement for him, but when Matthews started speaking, he deviated from it. I don't know what to say, he began. His voice was hoarse. I've been a police officer for 18 years. I thought I was doing my job. I thought I was keeping the community safe. He paused, struggling. But listening to all these people testify, hearing how I made them feel, watching that video of myself, I don't recognize that person. I don't want to be that person. He finally looked at Amara. Dr. Johnson, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know it doesn't take back what I did. But I am truly sorry. The apology felt hollow to Amara. Too little, too late. And possibly just a strategy to save his career. The board deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, Judge Morrison read their decision. The evidence presented today shows a clear pattern of discriminatory behavior by Officer Derek Matthews. The traffic stop of Dr. Amara Johnson was conducted without legitimate cause and was motivated by racial bias. Furthermore, the department's failure to address previous complaints enabled this behavior to continue. She looked at Matthews. Officer Matthews, this board has voted unanimously to terminate your employment with the police department, effective immediately. Additionally, we are recommending that the city attorney's office review whether criminal charges for civil rights violations are warranted. Matthews slumped in his chair. His attorney whispered something to him, but he didn't seem to hear. Furthermore, Morrison continued, we are recommending comprehensive reform of the department's complaint review process. The fact that Officer Matthews accumulated 12 complaints without serious consequence represents a systemic failure that must be addressed. The hearing ended. People filed out of the room, some looking satisfied, others still angry that it had taken this long. Patricia hugged Amara. You did it. You won. But Amara didn't feel like she'd won. She felt exhausted, drained. Yes, Matthews had been fired. Yes, reforms were being implemented. But she couldn't shake the feeling that this was one battle in a much larger war. Outside the building, reporters waited. Amara gave a brief statement. Justice was served today, but justice delayed is justice denied. It shouldn't have taken a viral video and months of public pressure for the department to take action. The real test will be whether these reforms lead to lasting change. 6 months after the hearing, Amara received an unexpected phone call. It was from the Police Academy training director, Captain Franklin Hayes. "Dr. Johnson, I know this might seem unusual," he said, "but we're redesigning our training program, specifically around implicit bias and community relations. We'd like to invite you to speak to our recruits, help them understand what it's like on the other side of a traffic stop." Amara's first instinct was to say no. The last thing she wanted was to spend more time with police officers. But then she thought about Officer Chen, about the young officer at the community meeting who wanted to do better, about all the future officers who could either be part of the problem or part of the solution. "I'll do it," she said, "but I want to be real with them. No sugarcoating." "That's exactly what we need," Hayes replied. The presentation was scheduled for a Friday morning. Amara spent days preparing, working with her therapist to make sure she was emotionally ready. She wanted to be effective, not just angry. When she arrived at the police academy, she was surprised by how young the recruits looked. Fresh-faced, eager. Most of them probably in their early 20s. They filed into the auditorium and sat in neat rows, notebooks ready. Amara stood at the podium and looked out at them. Somewhere in this room could be the next Matthews, or the next Chen, the next officer who would pull someone over and have to make a choice about how to treat them. "Good morning," she began. "My name is Dr. Amara Johnson. 6 months ago, I was pulled over by one of your colleagues while driving home from work. I hadn't committed any crime. I hadn't violated any traffic law, but I was stopped, accused of theft, and treated like a suspect. Why? Because an officer looked at me and decided that someone who looks like me couldn't possibly own the car I was driving." She played the video of her traffic stop. The recruits watched in uncomfortable silence. Some shifted in their seats. Some looked down at their notebooks. When the video ended, Amara continued. "That officer had 18 years of experience. He'd been trained, just like you're being trained. He probably sat in a room like this once thinking he was going to be one of the good ones. But something went wrong. He developed biases. He started seeing people as threats instead of citizens, and the system let him continue for years." She paused, letting that sink in. "I'm not here to tell you all cops are bad. I've met good officers. Officers who genuinely want to serve their community. But I'm here to tell you that good intentions aren't enough. You need to actively fight against bias. You need to question your assumptions. You need to see people as people, not as stereotypes." She talked about her own journey. Growing up poor, working hard, earning her degrees, building her career, everything she'd accomplished. When Officer Matthews looked at me, he didn't see any of that. He saw a black woman in an expensive car and his brain filled in a story. Stolen car, drug money, something illegal. He didn't even consider that I might have earned that car, that I might belong in it. A young recruit raised his hand. "How do we stop ourselves from doing that? How do we not make assumptions?" It was a good question, an honest question. "You start by acknowledging that everyone has biases," Amara said. "Everyone, including me. The key is being aware of them and not letting them control your actions. When you pull someone over, check yourself. Ask yourself why you're stopping this person. Is it a legitimate violation? Or is it something about them that's triggering your assumptions?" She talked for an hour, answering questions, sharing stories, trying to make them understand the human cost of bias. As the session ended, she noticed someone standing in the back of the auditorium. A figure she recognized, though she hadn't seen him in months. Derek Matthews. Her heart rate spiked. What was he doing here? After the recruits filed out, Matthews approached her slowly. He looked different than he had at the hearing. He'd lost weight. There were dark circles under his eyes. He looked broken. Captain Hayes stepped forward. "Dr. Johnson, I should have mentioned." Derek asked if he could attend. "I thought it was important for him to hear what you had to say." Amara looked at Matthews. Part of her wanted to tell him to leave. But another part, the part that believed in change, was curious. "Can we talk?" Matthews asked quietly. "Just for a few minutes." Against her better judgment, Amara nodded. They sat in the empty auditorium, with Hayes and Patricia, who had accompanied Amara, standing at a respectful distance but within sight. "I've been in therapy," Matthews said. 3 times a week since the hearing. Trying to understand why I did what I did, why I treated you that way." Amara said nothing, just waited. "I grew up in a neighborhood that changed a lot when I was a kid," he continued. "White families moved out. Black and Latino families moved in. My dad was angry about it all the time. He'd say things, make comments. And I absorbed it. I didn't even realize how deep it went until I started really examining myself in therapy. He looked at his hands. That's not an excuse. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I've spent every day since the hearing thinking about the harm I caused, not just to you, but to everyone I pulled over, everyone I treated like they were less than human. Amara felt a complicated mix of emotions. Anger because his apology didn't undo what happened. Sadness because she could hear the genuine remorse in his voice. And something else, something unexpected, a tiny bit of hope. What are you doing now? She asked. I'm working with a community organization, teaching workshops on de-escalation and bias recognition, volunteering with at-risk youth, trying to make amends, I guess, or at least trying to do something positive with the mess I made. He pulled out a card and handed it to her. This is the organization. We work with kids who've had negative experiences with police, help them process their trauma. I tell them my story. I tell them what I did wrong. I try to show them that people can change. Amara looked at the card. The organization was one she recognized, a good one that did important work. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Matthews repeated. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that your courage, your willingness to speak up, it didn't just change policies. It changed me. You made me see what I'd become, and I'm trying every day to be better than that. They sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Amara spoke. I'm not ready to forgive you. Maybe I never will be. What you did caused real harm, and that doesn't just go away because you're sorry. Matthews nodded, his eyes wet. But, Amara continued, I'm glad you're doing this work. I'm glad you're trying to change. Because if you can change, maybe there's hope for others too. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't friendship. But it was acknowledgement. Recognition that people were complex, that change was possible, even if it was hard and messy and incomplete. Matthews left shortly after, and Amara sat alone in the auditorium for a few minutes, processing what had just happened. Patricia sat down beside her. How are you feeling? Confused, Amara admitted. I hate what he did. But seeing him now, hearing him talk about the work he's doing, it makes me think about what justice really means. Is it just punishment? Or is it also rehabilitation? Transformation? It can be both, Patricia said. And you don't have to have all the answers. 3 months later, Amara stood in a different kind of auditorium. This one was at a major auto show, packed with journalists, industry professionals, and automotive enthusiasts. The lights were bright, the energy was electric, and Amara felt genuinely excited for the first time in months. This was what she loved. Not the spotlight, not the activism, but the engineering, the creation, the innovation. On the stage behind her was her latest design, covered by a sleek black cloth. The next generation of electric vehicles incorporating breakthrough technology that her team had developed. But today was about more than just the car. It was about the people who had helped build it. Before I unveil this vehicle, Amara said into the microphone, I want to introduce you to my team. These are the engineers who made this possible. She gestured to the group standing beside her. 8 engineers, young and talented. 5 women. 6 people of color. All brilliant. All chosen not because of diversity quotas, but because they were the best candidates for the job. These engineers represent the future of this industry, Amara said. Some of them came to Apex through our scholarship program. Others found us through our outreach initiatives. But all of them are here because they have the talent, the drive, and the creativity to push automotive technology forward. She introduced each one, sharing their backgrounds and contributions. The crowd applauded enthusiastically. Then it was time for the unveiling. The cloth dropped, revealing a stunning electric SUV with sleek lines and innovative design. The crowd gasped and applauded. Cameras flashed. But Amara's eyes were on her team, watching their faces light up with pride. This was what mattered. Not just her own success, but the door she could open for others. The opportunities she could create. The future she could help build. The car incorporated all the latest innovations in electric vehicle technology. Extended range, faster charging, better performance, but it also included something special that Amara had designed personally. This vehicle includes an advanced safety system, she explained. It has interior cameras that can detect driver distress or medical emergencies.